Thank you for coming to this concurrent session, number 22, Economic to Basic Income, the second round of this topic. In this session, we have three fascinating presentations by three bright people. The first presenter is José Rocha, who are from JusGov Minho University. He will talk about the banks, loans, the credit card, and other natural predator of UBI and concerns for lawmakers. And second speaker is McLaverty from Transcendence. He'll talk about global tax after the socioeconomic transition. And our third speaker is Romain from the think tank and speak on why and how basic income must be financed by monetary creation. And each speaker have 15 minutes, and then questions and answers and discussion follow. So now I would like to invite first speaker, José. Floor is yours now.
Thank you, Toru. Thank you, everyone attending. Like Toru said, I'm José Rocha. I'm a student in PhD in public law in Portugal in the Minho University, and I'm going to talk to you about the natural predators of UBI. Just put this on presentation mode. My study is if we had a universal basic income and it existed at a national or big enough regional level, we would want the effect to be to have less poor people, less misery, and better off results in things like nutrition, housing, education, and health. But to implement a UBI, even if it's on top of the existing social safety net, we would have to adapt some or a lot of legislation, not just to implement it directly, like budget or tax questions, but we would have to adapt to a market system that has a new reality because it's based on a capitalist system. So the opportunity and the availability makes the market adapt, and it may just have a set of objectives that are opposite to the objectives set off by the UBI implementing politicians. It is my view that there's a sector of the economy that is kind of pre-designed to use this, and that can be a natural predator for the UBI recipient. That's why I call it a natural predator for your UBI. So, who can these predators be? They can be banks, they can be credit institutions, loan companies, companies that sell products or services and get paid on installment payments, and money upfront reselling schemes or pyramid schemes. The supposed advantage that we would have on a UBI is that we would have a financial asset that gives us more power, because we can use it for any individual need, or at least any individual need that we can trade for money. But the financial markets, usually the banks or credit cards, they use the lack of income or the lack of liquidity of an individual, so they can get paid back in the future and they earn from the interest. This is not always fair, but it's a legal process and it usually has societal advantages. This does not change because there is a UBI. What I think changes is the ability of the creditor to get paid back from his loan. On a day-to-day basis, the UBI recipient is more likely to have more financial stability, so he will be more likely to pay his loans. There's also no perverse effect here. But I think there is a perverse effect in two parts of the debt relation, the birth and the death of it. So nowadays, if we're granting a loan, for example, we have to see which income and which wealth an individual has. Usually his income comes from work and his wealth is a house, a vehicle, or another asset. So the banks review how much effort you're going to make on paying your loan and paying the interest, and they see your property and your income also as a collateral. that meaning a way to get them to pay back so they don't lose in this transaction. Because of this evaluation process, still nowadays, without the UBI, people loaning have problems when they get suddenly unemployed or when they get sick or their influx of income changes for some reason or their asset evaluation changes for some reason. When this happens, there's a defaulting on the payments, and the banks or the loaners, the lenders, use the property and the income to get paid back using the legal processes that vary from state to state. So if UBI was a universal collateral, what could or could not change because of it? So in the birth of the credit relationship, we are calculating the whom and the how much money can be lended. And if you cannot take into consideration a UBI, it can be considered so that your financial effort comes down, is lower, because UBI can be used for your basic needs, but you may only loan if they have some sort of other income. And the same goes for credit cards, I would say even more, because it's a more difficult control of credit card use. And in the death of the relationship, the death, assuming that UBI can use voluntarily, that meaning I can by contract make a payment for my loan, or after I default on it, or by law, if it's included as collateral or not excluded as collateral, it can be used for payment. So if it's not excluded, there can be a predatory campaigning. They can look for UBI recipients to get loans, making the state indirectly finance their activities, because UBI will basically guarantee that the credit will be paid because it's paid for from a secure financial provider, that is the state. That income should not be a relief for the banks by proxy. It should be a relief for the individual getting it. So this becomes a question. Is UBI going to be a tool for the people, or is the UBI recipient going to be a tool for the financial market to finance itself? If the purpose of the UBI is to guarantee freedom, is to end abject poverty, this exploitation of this instrument may have a predatory behavior like it already has in most Western culture. As we see by the amount of consumer data, the more dependent people are the lower middle class and the poor people depending on loans and defaulting on loans. And they usually do those loans not just for their house or for their car, they also use it for vacations, for TVs, and other things that can qualify as a misuse of credit. I don't think it's a misuse, it's a use of their freedom, and we shouldn't restrict their use of that credit. What we should do is make sure the credit system does not exploit that to become themselves a UBI recipient through the state. That would be a dystopian consideration. So if we consider that UBI will also unshackle us from the bureaucratic state, that we have to show again and again that we need the money and that we use it correctly, and we use the UBI to free us from our employers because we can choose our jobs, it would not make sense to let open the possibility of the financial sector concentrating the UBI recipients' money, their payments. So even if we are making a buying or an investment, we cannot assume that people have more cash on hand than they would if they didn't have a UBI. But unless we use proper legislation, this would also be attractive to people trying to make pyramid schemes and other sorts of abusive techniques. This is but a nuance in a UBI legislation, but I think it can make the difference of a break or of a make or break for a UBI project if left open, because UBI is a simple idea. It's even simple to apply, even not easy, but simple. But being a simple idea does not mean that our complex legal system does not need to be tweaked and worked on so that we can have it produce the objectives that we have for it. So this is not something that is viewed in most pilots or cash experiments because they have a problem of scale and time. If there's not enough money, if not enough people, and for enough time are receiving a UBI in an experiment, the market is too big to notice that difference, and so they will not turn into predators of it. This is a good thing for the researchers and for the subjects, but it also means that we have a few or no data about this problem. I think that we should see this as an effect that is only going to happen after we put the system in place and the market has the opportunity to profit from the UBI recipient when they make when they change houses, when they buy a second car, when they make student loans, and even if they buy products from a company on installment payments. If they don't have to verify that the buyer has another source of income that is not UBI, they're basically counting the UBI as a collateral for that payment. So to avoid this dystopian but probable scenario, I think a well-meaning program cannot be ill-structured. We should be prepared for the best that UBI has by preparing for the worst that UBI has. And because UBI is cash on hand, most exchanges, most social exchanges, economic exchanges will be improved by it, but there are some that are more dangerous exactly because it is cash on hand. So I have, as a conclusion, make a list of concerns for lawmakers when implementing a UBI scheme that activists, politicians, and other people that want to see the future implementation of UBI, hopefully sooner than later, should have in attention. I have compiled them into 2 basic points: that UBI should not be considered as a collateral. By law, it should be excluded as collateral. UBI should not be used in calculating loans or applying for credit cards and their limits of credit cards. It may be considered, but only if it's not the main source of income and calculation of your financial effort, because that objectively changes because your UBI can be used for your individual needs. Basically, all your other income can be used for your other things. Install payments should also have to verify that the buyer has another source of payment. It should be proven and it should be regular, so this doesn't have a loophole on it. The second set of concerns is about the courts. When the courts are using the legal means, they should only use the money given in the UBI scheme to reimburse them for taxes given or contributions that are owed to the state, or because of misdemeanors, meaning that they pay only the state for state things and not for private things. And even when they do so, they should try to dilute the payments so the effect on the UBI should be as minimal as possible. We should also have, if someone uses their UBI continuously to pay a loan, there must be a provision, a legal means, so that can force foreclosure. So they can still pay, but they can force the foreclosure, or the other institution has to consider the debt paid. And that should cover a period of time, for example, 2 years. If for 2 years you're only using your UBI to pay, you have to use this system so that you don't go on basically being dependent on the UBI for the financial institution. The other is, and this is a reality in most places, pyramid schemes and other abusive lending and advancing goods should be criminal offenses. They should be considered criminal, and the state should be made whole, should be paid back if someone is using other people's UBI to get paid. And in this, making the state whole makes it so that the state can act directly against this pyramid scheme, even if the person is not considering doing so. And the last two are reinforcement statements. The state should have the power to demand from the financial system all the necessary data to study the financial markets to see if they're diminishing the objectives set for the UBI scheme. The financial sector has a lot of data that would allow us to see if if the UBI sets are being led to, or if their activity is actually hurting them by I don't know, affecting housing, for example, or affecting job trading, etc. And it should be an administrative offense if the financial institutions do not comply with this legislation. And this should be in a harsh way, in a financially harsh way for them. And we should make the people directly involved in these transactions liable, so that they are sensible to what they are doing when they are lending or when they are selling on installment payments. They know that they can be liable for what they are doing. And I think that was all of my list. I would like to thank you for your time. Any question, I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose, for fascinating and very important presentation. We move on to the second speaker, and discussion and question will be followed by all three presenters finish their presentation. So our second presenter is Harry. Harry, now floor is yours.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I will, let's just let the technology do its work. Okay, perfect. So I think this is going to flow quite nicely from José's talk there. I've tweaked the title just a little bit, but obviously the ethos is the same. It's still very much inspired by global tax and a socioeconomic transition there. I'm going to keep this relatively short. All the slides are nice and visual, so it should be relatively okay to follow. So I think of tax in this sense. I want to use an analogy. I want to use the mobile phone. So traditionally, well, in times gone past, we used to use a pay-as-you-go phone system, whereby you pay for credit as and when you need it. But then we moved to a subscription model where we pay monthly. So you buy, and then you can buy bolt-ons as and when you need them if you're going on holiday, for example. So I think about tax in quite a similar way. And at the moment, the tax model, whichever country you're in, essentially says, well, when you've earned X amount of money, you pay Y amount of tax. But as we know, that's changing. We're moving toward a subscription model whereby we earn UBI on a monthly basis, and then we pay tax on top of that. And in the model I propose, that's in terms of the assets we pay in terms of the assets that we own. And I'm going to walk through exactly how that would work. So we're talking about a system change in tax, which is arguably sort of bigger than UBI. UBI in many senses is too restrictive because it refers to a feature of the system, but not the system in of itself. Arguably, well, I think there's too much press attention focused on the income part, when in reality, you can think of it in terms of sort of part wealth, part health, and part values. And also in the name, it doesn't necessarily tell us how we're going to pay for it. So in society, we have extraordinary assets and extraordinary salary, which I very crudely approximate toward GDP here. And of course, we've got extraordinary problems to solve. We've got a wealth problem. We've got excessive financialization. People are far too exposed to interest rate variability, as loans have become much larger than they've ever been before, and there are now many more of them. We've got a global dynamism problem. We've got weak social mobility. It's easier to build wealth through inheritance and marriage than it is through hard work and ingenuity. And of course, we've got a climate problem. We've got inadequate nationally determined contributions, certainly in terms of the way they're calculated, in my view. Everyone's on the race to net zero in annual terms, but far fewer countries at the very least are focused on reaching net zero for their existence. So we just don't quite know how to coordinate these assets to solve our problems. So I propose an iteration on UBI, on the UBI model called the full stack state pension. So this is essentially just UBIs layered on top of each other. So I use the example of Poland here. Really, I should have used Korea, but there we go. So if it had a UBI in the way that I would think about it, it would have three components. It would have a global United Nations component, where all individuals of member states of the UN would receive. It would then have a regional component, a European Union in this case, which all individuals of member states of the EU would receive. And layered on top of that, of course, is a national component, which all individual citizens of here, Poland, would receive. So to make this happen, we have to re-engineer the tax model around the state pension. I propose you do that in two steps. You upgrade the state pension to a lifetime subscription model, and then you let income tax contribute toward wealth tax, with the caveat that if your income tax amounts to more than the wealth that you owe, you can put the surplus in savings and investments. So I presented a much more in-depth version of this process and how it works in practice at the annual Freebus conference last year, and I will send a link to that presentation in due course. Okay, so before I mentioned issues around wealth, around societal health, and climate, and I argue that the core of these issues are really debt, reparations, and carbon emissions. So the full stack state pension is a generalized tool for all three problems, because universal in UBI can mean national, regional, or global. So on a global basis, we can think of it as a climate and social justice reparations tool. Regionally, we can think of it as a peace-building tool within a block of countries like the EU and elsewhere. And on a national basis, we can think of it as a wealth distribution tool. So with each nation paying into the lower levels of the stack based on their assets, we have a system where no one country or set of countries develops at the expense of any other. This, of course, drives harmony and progress both within a nation, within a regional bloc, and on a global basis. So the main thing we need to get right here is asset valuation. And I think we can do this through the digitization and tokenization of the certificates of ownership that represent the assets we use to determine one's wealth. I've proposed that we do this through a Harburger tax, which I've made reference to in more detail in the technical version of this presentation. And the result, if it goes right, is that we only need a technological basis to deliver the quote-unquote UBI, and we only need to use carbon taxes to disincentivize unhealthy behavior. In theory, we also wouldn't need to increase a nation's debt burden, which I'm sure we're going to go into more detail later. So just wrapping up, on implementation, we can expect to see a correction to the housing market, especially in places like the UK and Australia, just notorious for having a sort of housing super bubble. We can expect a reduction in wealth inequality, and we can expect to set ourselves on a pathway toward lifetime net zero global carbon emissions. So the next step is to prove that we can generate enough revenue on the model to make it viable, and to launch the technological infrastructure to make it happen. And in my day-to-day as a venture investor, that's what I'm planning on investing in. As mentioned, there is more insight to be found, technically speaking, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about later, and I'll of course share details for. But for now, that's everything I have to share, and look forward to sort of going into more detail in that in a second. Thanks.
Thank you, Harry, for a wonderful presentation. So now we are moving to the last speaker. So the Romain, floor is yours now, please.
Thank you, Toru. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us here. We'll start with a quick word of presentation about our organization. The think tank is a French non-profit organization that was created just 1 year ago, so we're brand new in the basic income game. We work on a financial model that would allow for a quick and efficient environmental transition. And in our model, basic income is a keystone. We have based our data on French economy, but the key concepts that we use can easily be scaled on an international level. This presentation will be a very quick summary of our key concepts. I hope it will be thought-provoking, but of course it would need far more development to get into the details of the various propositions. Our main argument is that it is possible to implement a 20% GDP basic income that would be entirely financed by monetary creation, and this in the frame of a large environmental shift. And this would be possible thanks to strong control mechanisms that I will explain shortly. Our work started with a mystery, with a question: how come basic income doesn't already largely exist? It is a strange situation because UBI is a bipartisan proposition. It can appeal to very wide variety of political opinions. It offers tremendous advantages compared to the redistribution model, and it would probably receive a massive public support. And yet, apart from a few test experiments, it is almost nowhere in political agendas worldwide, and it is only supported by, like us, a minority of people. Without going into too much detail, it is quite obvious that today the trends are quite adverse to UBI. The general movement worldwide is towards less tax and less public expenditures, and it is quite widely, the welfare model is quite widely undermined. So in that frame, UBI seems even less likely to happen in the coming years. More generally speaking, we strongly believe that the main concern about UBI is who is going to pay for UBI. Quite obviously, in order to implement one, you have to take money somewhere in order to give it to someone else. And every tax or every expenditure, people who own money won't agree to leave it to the others. So quite obviously, solving the financing of UBI is a key in order to implement it. I will very shortly advocate for the advantages of monetary creation in order to finance UBI. Very obviously, when you finance UBI with money creation, the finance issue becomes almost inexistent. If you don't take money from someone, no one loses a dime. It doesn't cost anything to anyone. So technically, it's an obvious advantage. But even on a symbolic level, implementing UBI will shift the spirit of the money received from the redistribution model, in which recipiendaries can be pointed out, whereas with a UBI, everybody will receive money, and as a society, we will collectively decide that we create the money we need in order to keep each other safe. So these advantages are quite obvious. The main question is how could we implement a significant UBI only with money creation? In our model, this proposition comes inside a broader frame of environmental transition. First, because we need to face and address the climate change issues, and in this climate change situation, it's quite obvious that we will have to change our consumption and to change the way we work and we produce commodities. This is obviously in this frame, UBI can play a massive role. In our model, we advocate for the end of redistribution replaced by UBI, but we do so without questioning the capitalist frame, without aiming at reducing inequalities. Our aim is to be as neutral as possible, even if it's not always possible. But the main concern is we don't want to take money from someone in order to give it to someone else. We have simulated a significant UBI that would amount to about 20 to 25% of the French GDP. And this would represent a revenue of 900 euros per adult, 300 euros per children, with no condition whatsoever. And this revenue will bring everyone very close to the poverty line. So instead of aiming at diminution of inequality, we aim at the suppression of poverty, which is not exactly the same, but it's an important difference. So the yearly cost of this UBI would be somewhere between 600 billion euros to 700 billion euros for France alone. And the question is, how can we create that much money? The first answer is it wouldn't be euro creation. It would be a complementary money that could be created by each state. This money would be at par with euro, but would not be convertible. So you could only buy commodities and services inside your own nation. Apart from this limitation, the money could be used for any commercial transaction. It could be used to pay taxes and wages, probably with a cap to be determined annually, because the competition between the two currencies would have to be solved at some point. This is for the basic proposition. But obviously, this amount is huge, and it seems totally unrealistic to create money to the extent of 20% of the GDP of a nation. So how can we achieve this goal? Inflation obviously would be the main concern. With that much new money in circulation, every economist will tell you that inflation will be impossible to control and would be huge. Well, without going into economy theory details, obviously we are not convinced by the quantitary money theories, and we do not believe that there is an automatic link between money creation and a rise in prices. But I won't argue that today because it takes too much time. But what we did was to imagine three mechanisms that would, in our sense, prevent any unwanted inflation, and I will expose shortly those three mechanisms. First, the money that we create being a complementary money, there will be some limitations on the demand side. With a complementary money, you can't travel worldwide with your UBI because you can't use the currency outside your nation. You can buy international commodities. So your use of UBI would be limited to your own national territory. So that's the first limit. And quite naturally, if you earn a significant basic income revenue, there will be probably a slight diminution of your working time. Your wages will probably go a bit low. And so the global household revenue might not rise that much. The new equilibrium in revenue will not be necessarily a huge rise. And these two natural phenomena tend to keep demand reasonable. The second mechanism is far more powerful. It is money destruction. If on one side we create 600 billion euros every year, on the other side we will destroy a lot of existing money. If you take the state and administration point of view, if you use basic income to pay welfare instead of taxes, then mechanically there will be far less need for taxes. So in our model, we implement massive tax cuts and replace them with monetary creation. This means that the money that is not taken to the economy will stay there, but most of all, it means that public bonds and other private credits will no longer be of any use because state and administration can finance themselves without private monetary creation. In that situation, we evaluate that state and administration can reimburse close to 200 billion euros of public debt every year, which means that 1/4 to 1/3 of the money we create on one side to finance UBI will be destroyed on the other side by debt reimbursement. So that's a strong control mechanism. And if we look at the private side of the equation, with more money, more free money distributed to households, and with tax cuts that will benefit to businesses, we can imagine that households and business will need less credit money, private credit money, and the total monetary creation by banks and other private institutions will decrease. So on one side, we will have public money created for UBI, but on the other side, private money will be less used and less created. So that will bring to a new equilibrium that is quite difficult to estimate, but it would somehow balance monetary creation. The third mechanism of control is a new tax that we suggest implementing. And this takes place in the global frame of climate change. We propose to suppress all business taxes and consumption taxes, all of them, and replace them by a single tax that we call the environmental value tax. This new tax would be based on each business environmental footprint, which means that every money of externalities generated by the private sector will be taxed at 100% rate. The only tax that businesses would pay is the damage they create to society and to environment. This means that each business will pay a different rate of tax based on its own footprint, and that every year this rate will be reassessed in order to reward businesses that have changed their production model towards lesser footprint, and that would punish businesses that remained bad to the environment. To give you a very quick and graphic example, if we imagine this new EVP tax, if you buy beef, as you can see in the picture, there will be a strong EVP tax of about 35% because beef is the most environmental toxic meat. Whereas if you buy chicken, the tax would be only 3%, especially for organic chicken. So consumption will be shifted towards less dangerous consumption. And even for chicken, as you can see, organic chicken will be far less taxed than in the industrial chicken, in order for prices to reward good consumption and punish bad consumption. This is a very, very simple example, but this would be for the entire economy. Each sector, each business will have to pay its own rate. And with this counterpart, the EVT, monetary creation takes a new meaning, and inflation takes a new meaning, because there will be a part of inflation that we desire. Fossil fuel products and services will get more expensive, but this is a result we are looking for. So this is a wanted inflation, and it's not, in our point of view, a bad inflation. On the other hand, environmental friendly products and services will see their prices lower. So this is a deflationary mechanism, and all in all, there will be a part of wanted inflation and of deflation. And considering this new tax with its individual rate, businesses will have to change their production model, and this will bring the economic competition to a new level. If businesses want to remain competitive, they will have to focus on their carbon footprint, and they will have a hard time raising their prices, because they will need to question their own model, and because of the tax rate, their prices will have to be kept low, because a fossil fuel business will see the price go up, and they won't be able to add inflation to inflation. So it's very hard to explain just two words, but this new tax will mathematically limit inflation, because businesses that do wrong won't be able to raise their prices. And even if we consider the worst case scenario, where inflation gets massive, then we can use the EVT fiscal database to monitor prices. Because this tax is individual, we will have to build a huge database that will be used to set the tax rate individually, but it could also be used to monitor the evolution of prices. And if abusive price rises are spotted, it can be easier for the administration to open discussions with the sector representatives and try to discuss price control, and even if needed, to launch a very well-targeted price control action, because we will monitor every move of the prices. So this is the summary of our proposition. As you can see, it is quite ambitious, but the conclusion is that we believe that a huge monetary creation is possible if it comes inside a larger frame of a new way to tax businesses, and along with an important money destruction. So this is the argument we support, and we believe in, that monetary creation could finance 100% of a very significant UBI. Thank you for listening. You can ask any question right now or later to the email address below, and I will give the microphone back to Toru.
Thank you very much, Romain, and thank you again, all three presentators. All of them are fascinating, and there are a lot of things probably we can discuss. So now I would like to open to floors. And so that if any of you would like to do some questions, please raise your hand. And I now see Kaori is raising her hand. So Kaori and then José. Yes, please. Kaori-san, can you unmute and speak?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so I would like to ask questions to both José and Romain. Is that okay? Okay, to José, thank you for your very insightful presentation. In your presentation, it's interesting to know that banks may be a predator of UBI. This isn't the idea that I've never known. But I think there is another point of view, because in fact, I'm teaching social studies at high school in Japan. And in my class, and when I treated the topic of UBI, one of my students pointed out saying that people whose income is only UBI cannot borrow money from bank. And that is inconvenient for most people. This is just a high school student's concern, but how do you think of this view? I appreciate if you could answer this high school student's question. And also, can I ask a question to Romain?
Yes, please.
Okay. You said 20% or 25% of GDP is a limitation of money creation. And I agree with your idea, but I'm wondering if is that GDP nominal or real GDP, or should it be potential GDP? So this is my question to Romain. That's all.
Thank you, Kaori. So now, Jose and Romain, could you reply? And then Jose have his own question, right? So yes, please.
Maybe Romain could talk first, and so I do the two parts. I
Okay.
answer and then I question.
Yeah. Okay. So if Romain, you're okay, please start.
Okay. At this point, our model is based on a nominal GDP. Because we set our model using 2019 data, which is the last available data before COVID. We tried to model the data with a regular economy. So we use the nominal GDP as of 2019. It will be better to use a real GDP, but it's already a very, very complex model. So at this point, we stay to this general nominal level in order to provoke this lesson, and then we will go further when time comes.
Okay, thank you very much.
So in your question about the banks being, the banks themselves are not the predators of UBI. The predatory campaigning is the problem. So if you have a UBI in society, you can promote trying to get the UBI recipients to have loans or more credit cards. So as a way to stop that, we can make shifts in our legislation so that we have UBI, and people that have only social benefits right now have difficulty going to the banks. But their difficulty is not about the money or about the quantity of money. The banks don't loan because those social benefits have a number of conditions that easily go away. So if you say, I have $1,000 of social benefit and I want a $2,000 loan, it would be easy to pay, but still the bank wouldn't give me because it's a social benefit and I can have it this month and not have it the next month. With the UBI, this does not happen because UBI is unconditional. So they can target this kind of lending because it's not conditional, so it maintains, so there's no risk for the banking. So the comparison that's made now, the banks don't loan because of conditions, and they could become predators, make campaigning to get more lands and bigger lands because of inconditionality, not because of the money value itself, because of the guarantee of payment, because the state always has money. So I think I answered the question. My questions are also to both the did I not answer? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. So I also have a couple of questions for Harry and Romain. For Harry, in this model that you have, doesn't it benefit more population concentrations? And does that not difficult more the environmental part, like bigger cities that have this global basic income have more people receiving it, and so that's more difficult to implement environmental measures because there's nothing stopping them from becoming more consuming in bigger cities? That would be my question to Harry. And I also have a couple of questions for Romain, because one is a comment. In the EU, we don't have that possibility of creating another currency. It's one of the sovereignties we have to give. So to do this, you would have to go out of the EU, or the EU model would have to change completely. And what I didn't understand was the part where you cut all the redistribution, and that doesn't account for elder people, for disability people, and your model says there will be still tax cuts on top of the UBI, but because you don't have the welfare system, but you have to evaluate every single company to see how much tax they pay in every single product. Does that even make more bureaucrats needed just to make the tax law applicable to them? Thank you.
Thank you, Kaori-san, and thank you, Jose. So now, Harry, could you reply, and then Romain?
Sure. Yeah, I'll answer the question. I realize I've actually got comments and questions for both of you, but I'll give everyone a chance to kind of ask their initial questions first. So you make a good point in terms of concentration, but I think just to start off in terms of concentration, let's think of it like the other way around. So I'm proposing paying for this through assets. So the asset concentration. So I'm sat in London right now, right? So it's like you've seen the FT. It's like one of the most unipolar countries in the world, right? So the assets are basically all here, but the wealth is universal. Sorry, but the assets are not universal. It's not like everyone in London has the same amount has an equal amount of assets, right? It's not like everyone's got 1 million. It's like there's a massive range. So there's a massive range in terms of there's massive wealth inequality or asset inequality in terms of London and the UK, let's just say. However, the UBI is equal. It's the same. So what's actually going to happen is that you're going to have a much greater proportion of the funding for the UBI come from London. You see what I mean? Rather than UBI, and I guess that funding is going to be greater. Let's just take London, right? Like the funding like out of London to pay for, let's say, the national UBI, just to keep it simple, will be greater in aggregate than the amount of money London takes in by way of UBI. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it makes sense. But in a global level, it gives the ability for most people to increase their footprint, not diminish them, because Swedish people would be paying for Ethiopian people and Chinese people to have more a bigger footprint where they're concentrated in big cities.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's actually something I wanted to flag in your presentation, because you talk about it's not like a UBI as a panacea, or any variations of it is a panacea. You've got to change policy around it. So so that is one of the policies. Like in terms of, let's just think about it in terms of like global. I think I talked about global climate and like social justice reparations. So in that sense, you can think of it like this. Sorry, this is a bit of a long answer, but I just think it's important to get right. Essentially, let's say take the UK and India. It's cheaper to save a gigaton, like a gigaton of emissions, or reduce a gigaton of emissions in India than in London, than in the UK, but all the money's in the UK. So the UK is basically paying India and saying reduce your carbon emissions. So this would be distributed out from a climate perspective on the condition that these countries meet net zero targets. They're saying you have to meet net zero targets and you have to have that in policy. Otherwise, you're just not going to give you the money. Yeah, I think that's the answer you were looking for, really. Yeah.
Well, José, you pointed out the two main technical difficulties about our proposition. So your questions are excellent. The easiest one to answer will be about leaving or spending Europe, the European Union. Technically, euro is the European Union's money, but it's not the unique money. Countries belonging to the EU must use the euro, but other monies can be created. Nowhere in the European treaties is it written that you can't create your own money. And thinking of it, France actually has a second money. It's not very well known, but we use the Caribbean franc, which is money used in our Caribbean islands, for example. In France, actually, we have 2 or 3 official monies, even if euro is obviously the main money. You can also argue that Bitcoin and other crypto monies are not illegal. We already use many monies. There are local territories that use local money. They create money. So creating a complementary new money, we believe, is possible. Of course, there will be political arguments, political discussions, but on a legal point of view, it is not forbidden. It would be a massive change, but it doesn't require to leave or change the European Union. On the contrary, using a complementary money is also a way to limit inflation, because many transactions will still be using the euro. Most businesses will want to use the euro, and having a second money is easier than creating I don't believe we can create a 20% GDP money using euro, because that would be inflationary. But using a complementary money is a way to avoid this difficulty. So you're right, it would be politically complicated and challenging, but it's not impossible. Regarding your second question, yes, of course, the first year of implementation of the EVT tax would be very difficult to implement. It would take months, probably 2, 3 years to get the individual rate accurate enough and precise enough. This would need a couple of years of preparation, of discussion with the businesses, so it can be implemented in a second. But considering that we remove all other taxes, it means that many people working in the tax department will have nothing to do but work on this new tax. So they will have some work for the coming years. So yes, it will be at first very difficult to implement.
Sorry, all tax, you would substitute all taxes, or all company taxes? All taxes, individual taxes too?
I didn't get specific in this short presentation yet, but in our model, we suppress each and every taxes except this EVT, business tax, and one single household tax in order to finance the public services. But business taxes in France, we have maybe 300 of them. So it's already so difficult to monitor and to deal with, that replacing them with one single tax, even if it's a complex tax, will still be easier. And the other part of my answer would be that in the first year, we don't need to be that accurate. We could, in the first step, just implement a sector tax. For example, we know that transportation amounts to 30% of the French carbon footprint. So we could set the transportation businesses tax in order to collect 30% of the total EVT. In the first time, we can implement a sector tax, and as time goes on, we can go down to individual businesses. That's an easier way to implement after. Does that answer your question?
Yes, you did. I still don't think it would work, but you answered.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Romain. There other question. We still have like 12 minutes to end. All of you are most welcome to raise some question or comment.
I've definitely got things, but I want to make sure the attendees have a chance to kind of drill us on our first presentation. If there are no further ones, I'm happy to kind of fire away.
I think if every audience is okay at this moment, maybe if not now, you can raise a hand like 5 minutes later, so that Harry have something. So please, Harry.
Yeah. So a few things. So there were definitely like lots of points that resonated on. Obviously, like the two other presentations. I think there's lots of places I can kind of dive into. I would say, so actually for you, Romain, I actually invested in a company that sought to essentially like take every like item of clothing and like determine its carbon footprint. So this kind of thinking about like databases, I think this is very, very close to home. And in terms of like programmability of money and so on, I actually used to lead investment for Europe's first crypto VC fund. So yeah, this is again really, really close to home. I think, well, I guess my main question on your presentation is more like the sovereign debt in general. So forgive me for my ignorance, but I understand that like as a short-term solution, so for example, during COVID, it definitely made sense because we just had to get money out quickly. I think you made a comment around how it wasn't necessarily inflationary, or like I think money creation in general is not necessarily inflationary. But there is definitely analysis around how eventually every empire falls, and they fall because they have to pay their debt. They have to pay off their debt, and eventually, so I don't know if you've seen Ray Dalio, the hedge fund manager, did analysis on like empires over the last 600 years, and basically said like they all suffer from this. If you look at the Roman Empire, you look at the American Empire today, it's all basically the same. By definition, doesn't that mean we have to place limits on increasing the debt burden, so that we don't kind of accelerate or like advance that scenario?
Well, precisely, I agree with you, and that's why the way we said it allows us to diminish sovereign debt, because the money created being complementary money, it is not debt that is created. It's consumption money. It's UBI money. It doesn't come with a counterpart. It is pure creation, which is different from private money creation. When a bank creates money, it creates debt. When the state creates money, it doesn't create debt. So with monetary creation, the public administrations will no longer need to ask the private sector to create money for them and buy it in forms of public bonds, because money will be available in the form of monetary creation. So for the future, there will be no more new sovereign debt. And because monetary creation gives a whole new revenue for the state administration, with this money and the euro they receive in taxes, at last, nations can start to reimburse their sovereign debt. And that's a strong control mechanism, because on the one side, they create their own money, but on the other side, they destroy existing stocks of private money. They reimburse the sovereign debt for close to 200 billion euros a year in France. And so the massive stock of public debt can at last be reimbursed, because for the last 50 or 60 years, not a single euro has been used to reimburse debt in France anyway. So our model of monetary creation allows for the reduction of sovereign debt.
Got it. I think that makes sense. It's definitely, it's a massive rabbit hole we could go down, but I'm going to send you something which I've done some thinking around on the side of this, which I'm going to send you. It'd be great to get.
I do the same, yeah.
Yeah. And I think for José, sorry, I wrote this on a different page. Are you almost questioning the notion of UBI to pay for debt? Is that really true in every? Like, are you saying that we shouldn't pay for UBI? Sorry, we shouldn't pay for debt using UBI under any scenario?
That's not the point. The point is not the way people use UBI, is the way people get used because they have a UBI. It's a different question. I believe anyone can use their money to buy stuff. They're free to do it. If they want to, if they have a job that earns 1,000 euros and they have a UBI of 1,000 euros, they have 2,000 euros and they want to buy a house. They can go now without the UBI, they could go to like 40 or 50% of their capability, because the other 50 or 60%, the bank considers that they need for their private needs. If a UBI was to exist, they could use a bigger part of that. They could use 70 or 80% of the money they earn on their job, because the UBI would be covering the other expenses. So the banks can consider a UBI. They just cannot consider UBI as their means of payment, because if I have a UBI and I don't have another income, and they can use this, I can get materially poor. I can get no money at all, because my UBI comes and it goes to the bank. And because I was preyed upon on the idea that I could use that to use it. So it's not a limitation on paying debts with UBI, it's a limitation on institutions coming for the UBI. That's why I say it's predatory. It's not necessarily a problem. It's just a tension that is natural. Financial markets want finance, and the best financer is the state, because when they go broke, they just up taxes. So even if the bank pays taxes to get paid, it gets money. The other people don't. So it's the perfect person to owe money to you is the state. And so they could use the UBI as an intermediate, as a proxy to get paid. And that's, I think it would be the main problem there, not the payment of debts for UBI. You can pay your debts with the money you have and the way you can pay them.
Yeah, agreed. I think essentially, like it's almost like the climate question you have for me, right? It's like you can't just roll out UBI by itself. You have to kind of implement these extra.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's the main theme of my my PhD thesis is we have a UBI. How can we do it? And what does it mean for every other part of our life? Because having a UBI means different things. We can have a UBI, and when we go to jail, we don't receive our UBI. The jail receives it and gives us our food, pays for security, etc. It can be used to finance that system. It can be used when you go out. You have a job, but you want to receive more money, and you say, oh, I'm gonna use my UBI for this, and after I'll get paid, I can borrow my UBI in advance if I have something. But it's different than being able to be looked for by a financial system or by a loan company, because they're pre-designed to reach out for as much money as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. No, the reason I asked because my model kind of focused on like how to, like, part of that kind of part of reducing excessive financialization is reducing the value of housing, but without people losing their housing. So almost like diversifying your wealth. So it's almost like paying down the debt is like an implicit part of the model. And I guess on the tax part, for a number of reasons that well, it's definitely too technical for today, but it basically eliminates personal allowance. So like the first, I don't know, 1,200 euros or 12,000 euros that you'd earn in income is, you know, maybe like not, I don't know what it is in Portugal, but, you know, maybe it's not taxed, but then, but like in my model it would be, but the people with very low incomes also will typically have very low wealth. Therefore, that like tax would just go back into savings and investments rather than go to the government. Yeah, let me pause there. I think Toru, did you say that we had to finish 15 minutes earlier for the break?
Yes, that I was told from the organizer,
Okay.
but I think a few minutes extension would be allowable. But before closing, I'd like to make sure as a participant, like haven't talked yet, Sergey, Jin, Sansik, Alexander, are you okay? Not raising any question or comment? Or Kaori-san, would you like to have another question? Is it okay or happy? Okay. Good. And Harry, you have something to say?
Maybe just a couple of things.
Okay, please do.
Well, I know I've been hogging on
before, so that in 15 minutes, the next session will start. So in anyone in the audience would like to leave, please leave. We just continue another several minutes, so audience can freely leave. Okay, Harry, please continue. Sorry.
Absolutely. So I think I just had a couple of things for you, Romain, again. I think So I noticed two things. I think one, you said money creation means that it costs absolutely nothing. I think, to be honest, I think we covered a lot of that. But I think maybe the second point is basic income to, I think you said on one slide, a basic income to end poverty plus welfare. Is that really true? Like, don't you still need, like, to our point around kind of re-engineering around, like, re-engineering the economy and society around the UBI, don't we like still need these services, but just in a different way? Like I don't know, like for example, like UBI is demonstrably an antidepressant, but that, you know, we still need a health service. Have I misunderstood something there?
No, that's about it. I can tell maybe just one slide I kept in the end. The idea is not to suppress welfare money, but the welfare system. But in terms of revenue, it would be quite the same. On the left part of the chart is the today's French model, and on the right part of the screen you have what we project. Welfare in France amounts to 500 billion euros yearly, with a few costs and net subsidies for 65. In our model, just across the dots, you see that the welfare money will amount to more than the current money, because we just replace social contributions with money creation. But what people receive in terms of welfare is replaced by UBI, and in order the amount of UBI they receive means that even for retired people, you earn at worst the same, and at best you earn more money.
So you said welfare, and you meant social assistance programs. So you keep public health, public schools, disability.
On the upper part of the chart, you see that there are 600 billion euros for public services, security, education, health. Today they are paid for by many taxes, but tomorrow, that's what I was saying earlier, we would replace them by a unique tax on revenue and assets in order to finance the classic public services. And the welfare money will be financed by monetary creation. As you can see, there are three parts. Citizens still pay for public services with one classic tax on revenue and assets. The business only pays for their carbon footprint, and essential needs covered by UBI are paid by the state with monetary creation. On a schematic.
Well, this makes a lot more sense. This is clarified things perfectly.
And as you can see, that this means less tax, so money is left in the economy in order to shift towards a more carbon neutral model. So money will be available to change our consumption and production model. And because of the EVT, they will be very incitated to shift the model. And because,
But don't you have the problem in this system, if people don't have their contributing systems, the more I earn, the more I declare I earn, so I have a bigger pension when I'm old. Would this not make a problem for people not to declare how much they actually earn, because there's no, the contributions will not be proportional?
They will earn UBI for life, and with 900 euros per month, it is close to the average retirement pension in France. So people will know when they are born that they will earn this for life, and people who earn more money and want to save for their retirement can do so, save money and spend it on during their retirement. But the proportional retirement system would be cancelled.
You would reward private pension systems. like the kind of
probably
the US
probably.
kind. Okay.
Probably, but this is the basic model. But if each nation decides that on top of that they want a public retirement system, it's a democracy. You can later vote for it. So this is the basic model that answers our question. But it's a starting point. Then each and every nation can build on that and adapt on that, depending on their political wants and needs. The aim was to bring more money without taking money from rich people, because rich people, in our opinion, are the main opponents to climate policy. So we try to find a model in which we create more money for the environment transition without taking money from the rich, which is a challenge.
Thank you. Thank you all presentators. I think we have had really wonderful session. It started by José for the need for kind of safeguard against as UBI can be a universal collateral. That's what I heard today at first, but yes, you are right. And it's followed by Harry's blueprint, how UBI can be used for better and ecological society. And Romain is also in a similar way to present how it could be modeled and how it can be politically feasible. And we learn a lot, and I don't want to cut the discussion between three of you, but probably it's time. So the hope not only me and the presenter, but all participants had gained some insight from this session. And I hope discussion arose from this session to continue. And yeah, thank you very much all, and thank you again, José, Harry, Romain. I really enjoyed and hope everyone else feels
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Yep.
Thank
Thank you very much,
you.
and thank you,
So-
Toru, for hosting. It's been fantastic. Great chat.
Thank you. And next time, let's meet in person. Okay,
Yeah,
have a nice
absolutely.
day.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.